We're going to get started here in just a few minutes, or maybe less than a minute. Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Good morning. My name is Nancy DePel. I'm the regulatory law judge presiding over this morning. This is our public meeting. Getting some feedback just a little bit. Is that television or computer? Hold on just 1 minute. We're having some technical difficulties here in the room. I don't have any speakers, so I don't have any speakers, I don't think. Is it, I believe it's the witness computer, maybe? I'll log out and see if that helps. Did that take care of it? Testing? Maybe that took care of it. Maybe it was my computer. I didn't think I had any speakers. Okay, I apologize about that. We can go ahead then and get started again. This is the public meeting, quarterly meeting with MISO and SPP, and everyone is virtual with our two RTOs. Commissioners Kolkmeyer and Coleman are here with me, and Chair Hahn and Commissioner Mitchell are online. So I'd ask everyone to mute your microphones if you're not going to be speaking, and we will basically follow a similar procedure that we've done in the past. I'll ask if SPP maybe would like to go first, and we'll have you do your presentation, and then MISO, and then we'll, in between there, we'll all offer it up for the commissioners if they have any questions. And after the presentations, I'll open it up for staff questions and other questions that might be present today. So if there's nothing further, I think we can go ahead and get started with SPP. Can I ask you to identify yourselves before you start to speak, and if you need us to run the presentations from the room here, you will have to let us know. Otherwise, if you can share your screen, that will work.
Okay. Good morning. I am Kim O'Gwen, Senior Director of Regulatory Policies here at SPP. And joined with me today is Sunny Rahim, who is the Director of System Planning. And I believe we will need you all to run our presentation for us. Great to see my dear friend Commissioner Coleman and also Chair Hahn. Looking forward to seeing you all here soon in Boston. So I believe they have our presentation up. Sunny, are you able to see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Well, I'll turn it over to Sunny, and Sunny will walk through our presentation for today.
Great. Good morning. Sunny Rahim, Director of System Planning. I've been at Southwest Power Pool going on 15 years with experience in the generator interconnection group and transmission planning. Definitely appreciate the opportunity to give an update on some exciting work that we're doing here at SPP, and to hear any questions or comments that you may have on our transmission planning efforts. So if we can go to the slide 3, I'll start describing some of our recent improvements for the transmission planning process. We've reviewed some of the input from the commission, and and tailored this presentation to address several of the key points that was requested, including overarching objectives for our transmission planning process. It is a very complex process given its magnitude of scope and its deliverables. Those deliverables are transmission solutions that we look for consensus, endorsement, and justification for being cost effective and also addressing future reliability needs of the system. We'll also talk about improvements in our transmission planning and generation interconnection process, along with considerations of using existing right-of-ways or co-location reconductoring considerations, and any other improvements that we're doing along our seams with our neighbors. So if we go to slide four is a good visual of the items that we already perform in our integrated transmission plan. The integrated transmission plan is our 10-year horizon study that looks 10 years out in the future and determines what reliability needs exist on the system, what existing public policy needs exist based on state level goals such as renewables. There can be other considerations as well for public policy. In addition to that, we also consider economics. What's the cost of energy? Is there increased congestion occurring on the system? Are there projects that can help with that affordability concept of energy on the system? Last but not least, we also look at operational issues. So things that are persistently occurring in operations, we feed that into our regional planning process to determine if there's holistic transmission that can help improve those situations going forward. We'll dive a little bit into that in our recent success for the 24 ITP. Recently, we've added resiliency in our more recent ITP processes, really looking at extreme weather conditions such as extreme winter, extreme summer, the rapid load growth that can be driven by large load customers. And then last but not least, we're also looking at generator interconnection and aligning that with our regional planning processes under what we call the consolidated planning process. So all of these are the needs or the things that we're trying to fix out of our process. And where it really starts is on this slide is stakeholder input. The stakeholder input starts from the front end of the assessments as far as scoping out the study. What are the projections for these future energy resources, amount of load that we're forecasting? All of that's built through 72 unique milestones that we build consensus with our stakeholders on. Those 72 milestones are embedded into our regional planning process such that they provide consensus along the way as we're developing a portfolio. So as part of that consensus building, we also dive into the portfolio, the transmission upgrades that we come up with as a portfolio, the ones that address most needs for the least amount of cost. We get stakeholder input. There's opportunities in this input to help us review the solutions that we've developed, help us calculate the quantitative and qualitative metrics. There's things that our utility partners will know more than us, such as right-of-way limitations, substation connection limitations. They'll know these things that can help us make sure we're continuing to be affordable and reliable with our portfolio recommendations. So we take those things into consideration and go through an iterative process of updating that portfolio. In this, our transmission owners also have the ability to provide us input on right-of-way concerns, reconductoring opportunities, or aligning with local planning needs. So that is a very important piece in our portfolio development. On slide 6, we do go through a very rigorous process. As an engineer, I wanted to put as much math in this slide as I could, but I resisted and tried to bring this up a level. But there's a lot of rigor that goes into identifying what is affordable and what's reliable from a transmission solution optimization perspective. And there are several steps in here that SPP performs to make sure we are recommending affordable transmission through our portfolio process. So we go through evaluating each single portfolio across the 14-foot footprint, 14 state footprint that we have, and evaluate it both from a cost and reliability relief metrics. So we come up with metrics on how much this portfolio or this project alleviates needs on the system. It's not just good enough to get that loading from 100% to 99%. We're really ranking it to see how much relief these projects provide. And that relief could help avoid additional projects in the future. So there's a very significant ranking exercise that goes through the reliability projects and economic projects, and then they're combined together to identify the most cost effective upgrades, meaning that the cost addresses the most amount of needs possible. And that's how we really develop our portfolio. As the final screening step in this process, it does have to be justifiable. So reliability is easier to justify than economics, but there's a standard for economic justification, which includes that it must meet a one year benefit to cost calculation of at least 90% or higher, or 40 years. So looking at the asset, the transmission asset for 40 years, and calculating its benefit to cost at a 1.0. So that's a pretty significant return on investment threshold that we have embedded in our policies to make sure we're keeping our transmission decisions affordable when they're driven by economic needs. As part of this process, it is evolutionary and revolutionary. We continue to improve this and continue to challenge ourselves to add more to the process such that we're able to consider multiple scenarios and futures. In our 24 ITP was our first portfolio to look at extreme winter weather situations. In this portfolio, we were able to recommend projects that help support general extreme weather conditions where we saw some congestion on our system getting generation from the north to the south. So those projects that have the snowflake are really to help us strengthen our system with those north to south transfers for future extreme winter conditions. Over in the Missouri area, you'll see another area of projects noted with the snowflake. Those are particular to Winter Storm Elliott improvements. So we modeled the exact situations that occurred in Elliott, identified the key stresses on the system, and recommended to our stakeholders and our board of directors to build out transmission to help strengthen that part of the system as part of Winter Storm Elliott transmission planning review process. In addition to that, on the next slide, we do have SEAMS improvements underway today. We completed our 24 ITP portfolio. We're working on the 25 ITP, which has another layer of resiliency planning in it for extreme winter and summer. So not only just the winter seasons, but looking at summer. There could be the opposite type of constraints on the system, trying to get the generation from the south to the north in those extreme summer conditions when the load in the north may be higher than anticipated. We additionally have been working with MISO and MISO staff on our next coordinated system planning study, which is an innovative step forward to help looking at benefits from Order 1920 and seeing if we can consider those as ways of helping move SEAMS projects more to the finish line. So that CSP is underway. We did get a response for our waiver for centralizing models. We are planning on coming up with a approach going forward for that waiver being declined. It's likely to include that we will add more models to that approach and then continue to evaluate how we can consider additional benefits for that coordinated SEAMS study. We have additionally looked into a mid-Missouri line. This is one that's being led by ACI, MISO, and Ameren, and we're partnering with them to evaluate the benefits of this line across the Missouri state to see if there is opportunity for cost sharing with SPP members on the western side of that transmission line that is being evaluated. So great opportunity for SEAMS improvement that is involving multiple parties that have a common goal in SEAMS transmission improvement. Next, we have our details into the resiliency planning. This is a very innovative approach to evaluating resiliency and then also equating it to benefits. So for today's presentation, I'd like to just describe what the framework looks like for resiliency planning. Additionally, talk about the approaches that we used for evaluating resiliency and what our definition here at SPP is as part of our work for the 25 ITP. So if we go to the next slide, we've closely followed and participated in the North America Transmission Forum, NATF Forum, for helping define resiliency, along with working with EPRI and their Climate Ready program. Those are both nationally recognized programs to help define resiliency and to help create the framework on how resiliency should be considered in transmission planning investment. So that definition does relate to how a system can react to high impact, less frequent events and prepare and anticipate and absorb those types of events in transmission planning. So our solution as a first shot at it in 2025 ITP is address the first 4 points that have been defined in the EPRI definition. Great. So a little bit of detail on how we approach this between our two regional planning studies is on slide 12. In 24 ITP, which completed last year and has its portfolio approved, we really looked at a focused look on extreme winter weather. We had 2 sets of significant storms that impacted our region and our neighbors. So we made a conscious decision to add additional scenarios in the middle of performing the 24 ITP. And those additional scenarios were greatly supported by our stakeholders and board to add those into the 24 ITP such that we can accelerate transmission planning decisions. And it focused primarily on previous storms, modeling them, making sure that the transmission can accommodate and prevent those situations in the future. In the 2025 ITP, we took that a step further, not only looking at the previous storms, but we want to look ahead and estimate what a resiliency event may look like out in the future. So we worked with our stakeholders and EPRI to help define a resiliency scenario, how to estimate generation availability out in the future, such as year 2 or 10 years out in the future, and determining what that type of stress scenarios look like for extreme winter conditions. That's one of the resiliency conditions. The next one is extreme summer conditions. And our third one is the rapid spot load additions or large impacting load additions. So our approach there is to evaluate them and then also correspond the benefits of those events across a 40-year horizon to see if projects are justifiable from a cost perspective to benefit perspective in our 25 ITP portfolio. We'll be releasing a draft portfolio that includes these resiliency conditions at next week's SPP Transmission Planning Summit. That will show the initial portfolios walking into our quarterly meetings in October for approval. Just a little bit more detail on the next slide. We are looking at different types of measures of benefit. We're looking at ways that locational marginal prices, more on the economic side, how those can be improved through resiliency planning. Additionally, transfers analysis. How can we transfer power throughout the SPP footprint, the 14-state footprint, and make sure that transmission isn't the bottleneck in enabling generation to serve load. Third, we are also looking at load shed prevention measures. So we are trying to model load shed as it occurs at a extreme winter condition and trying to justify how much load shed can be prevented with additional transmission through this analysis. Great. The next topic we have is GETS, Grid Enhancement Technologies. This is I think kind of a buzzword out in the industry. We sometimes refer to it as non-transmission solutions. So you may see it in our governing documents as non-transmission solutions or alternative solutions to transmission, but it's aiming in the same direction of trying to capitalize on more of the grid that exists today by getting quicker to install devices on the system to enable more transfer of power in an economic and reliable fashion. So this gets is to maximize that transmission of transfer and transmission of electricity, and can include sensors, power flow control devices, just smaller in nature devices than steel on the ground transmission upgrades. So what does GETS do for us? If we can go to the next slide, our current planning process does consider GETS today. It is evaluated as part of our portfolio development. We do get project submissions from our stakeholders and utilities for GETS devices through the process. We have justified some GETS through our existing ITP and generator interconnection processes. Where it becomes a challenge for GETS to be justified is when you look across a 40-year horizon. It's likely when you look at costs and benefits across a 40-year horizon, transmission upgrades are likely to edge out than a GETS device because they are providing substantially more power flow transfers and amounts of energy that can be transported. So we recognize that that is a comparison of transmission or GETS. And what we're trying to focus in on the next slide is developing a new business function here at SPP that we recently presented to our strategic planning committee on developing an intermediate planning group. So the question of, should I pick GETS versus long-term transmission? That's still going to continue in the ITP process for long-term investment. But in this new function for intermediate planning, we're proposing to evaluate if GETS can be a supplement to long-term transmission. Long-term transmission is encountering some supply chain issues, which may extend its in-service dates out into the future. So for that period of time where that long-term transmission isn't available, this group would evaluate and recommend if GETS can supplement that time period before the transmission is placed into service, and justify that through savings for our stakeholders. So it's a pretty significant change from what we've done before. This would be a supplement to our long-term solutions. It's not a replacement, but another avenue that we can continue considering GETS in transmission planning. The reason that we landed on this recommendation to our strategic planning committee and also our finance committee is because we've done some analysis on the value this could provide. If we can go to slide 18, we've done some studies and provided some input to the Department of Energy and also partnered with EPRI in evaluating these facilities. And we've gone through the benefit to cost analysis. And to justify this new team, to justify the new work, it would take one GETS recommendation to be placed in service to save annual production cost savings to justify this team. So just one well-placed GETS could help offset the investment for the staff and policy and tools invested into this effort. Right, I think we're to the order 881 update. So let's go to the next slide if we may. So we are working on our 881 compliance, which is expanding our automation and tool sets within operations by developing a limited exchange portal software, which we've worked with General Electric or GE to create. This will help us with our ambient adjusted ratings and dynamic line ratings, and being able to collect that information on a monthly basis, which then will allow us to release this into our operational models on a monthly basis. We've had some preliminary structured testing performed with our stakeholders already, and there's a link to the latest information on that effort. We did include some slides in the next section on load trends that we're seeing in Missouri. I'm not going to cover those in detail, but do want to illustrate the numbers that are on the screen. They are starting to look like a pretty decent increase in load for the portions that SPP plans for. And on the next slide, you can see the visual of thermal needs. So these are thermal needs, so overloads on lines, and voltage needs that we're seeing in our latest ITP study, along with load growth that we're experiencing throughout our system. The red dots, those indicate significant load growth. So large spot load, large load growth in those areas. The darker blue is actually a representation of load reduction through energy efficiency or other efficiencies that may be encouraged in those areas. The last slide, and I'll promise I'll stop here, is just a reminder of the extreme and rapid load growth we're experiencing. We're seeing this across the nation through our research partnerships, outreaches to other transmission service providers, and that is happening here at SPP as well. So this is a comparison of our last two ITPs and the ITP that we're performing currently, which is the 2025, and its load forecast projections. That top maroon line is our latest load forecast in our futures, which is significantly higher than where we were in our previous ITP studies that collected load forecasts 2 or 3 years ago. So those load amounts are significantly increasing to the point where we're seeing year 10 forecast hovering in our latest forecast in year 3 or 4.
You're by yourself now. Yeah.
So I think that's a good stopping point for me, and we can open it up for any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Are there any commissioner questions at this time? Commissioner Kolkmeyer has some, so I'm going to let you go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you for your presentation. Very well done. Does SPP have a dashboard app with a dashboard on it like MISO? MISO has pretty much up to date or at time of what's going on the grid and what type of generation and what have you. And I look at that all the time. And I'm on the SPP side, the west side of the state versus the east side. So I'm more interested in what's going on the west side of the state. So.
Sure, Commissioner. There is, if you go to our website, spp.org, and on our front page, you will see similar apps to MISO listed on our homepage.
Okay, thank you.
Or just cellular communication. We also have an SPP Go app,
Yes.
which has those displays that Kim mentioned on just an app you can download on your phone. It also has a
SPP Go.
Yes, 2 words.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other commissioner questions? Anything online?
I do have one more.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
So would a battery storage facility qualify as a GITS? Is that it wasn't listed in one of the items, however, that is, a possibility.
Yeah,
that's non-generation.
Yeah, we do have SATOA, so they're storage assets that can be transmission mitigation. They're, from a terminology perspective, we separate them from GETs, but they can be used similar to GETs to solve transmission needs if that battery storage can alleviate that need.
Thank you.
Okay, if there aren't any other commissioner
Oh,
questions. Commissioner Mitchell.
Yeah, I have one, and it's more of a curiosity. In the GITS state of the technology in the industry, are there any technologies being evaluated or emerging that have to do with more efficient conductors, be it types of materials or reconductoring that can make the transmission more efficient or effective with less loss?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So there are some research projects that we're participating in to understand advanced reconductoring, which would bring down the loss component of it. So some of the challenges there are, does it almost do the opposite? Does it incur too much current and drive up voltage to the high end? And those are things that we're continuing to evaluate. We are working with other transmission providers that are perhaps a little bit more aggressive in that solution as their utility has experience with them and reaching out for lessons learned. That is one of our growing list of continuous improvement headed into the 26 ITP.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
And before we move on, I'll be remiss if I do not acknowledge Chair Hunt and also the Missouri staff in the work that they do here at SPP in our RSC Regional State Committee, as well as our Cost Allocation Working Group. Chair Hunt has really taken a major part in help us look at Order 1920 and the work that the RSC is doing on that. So just really want to acknowledge their work and their input into the processes here at SPP.
Okay, thank you. If there aren't any other commission questions at this time, I'm looking at staff. Did you want to ask questions now or wait until after MISO's?
Yeah, real quick question here. This is Rich Germiter with the Missouri Public Service Commission. Sonny, on slide 4, you laid out the ITP purpose and basically the general criteria that you used. Is that kind of in rank order of, biggest driver to least driver?
It is not. It's a good question, but it's not in any particular order. We evaluate all of those needs equally, including the new ones that will be generator interconnection needs under the consolidated planning process. Where we rank them is we identify all the needs, and then we rank the projects higher if they address more of the needs in a cost-effective manner.
Okay, and then in your discussion on GETS versus long-term transmission planning, can you provide a little more specificity on what puts those kind of competing or at odds versus working in concert with one another?
Yeah, today the way that transmission planning does is it's performing as a competition between GETS and transmission solutions. And more often than not, we see the transmission winning out because it has a larger ability to provide cost savings because it's transporting large amounts of energy from point A to point B. A GETS device can help mitigate more local solutions, so it's got less likelihood of opportunity and savings from a regional perspective. So it normally gets beat out by transmission solutions. We have about 4 or 5 recommendations that we've done through the ITP and generator interconnection process for GETS that have made it to the finish line, and they beat out transmission solutions across that investment calculation. Where our intermediate planning team is headed is to help bridge the operational and planning gap, and that's where it'll become a supplement. GETS will become a supplement to transmission solutions and leading up to their in-service dates, because there is congestion that occurs before long-term transmission is placed into service. GETS, some types of GETS can be quicker to install, and those would help alleviate congestion across that time frame before that transmission is placed in service. So we are changing our approach from moving from just solely a competition to a complementary framework.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Are there any other staff questions? Mr. McKinney?
Yeah, just real briefly. Adam McKinney with the Missouri Commission. Sonny, on slide 12, there was a discussion about energy stranded or undeliverable as a separate look in 2025 versus 2024. We know in previous winter events, there were some reliability issues that caused generators in Southwest Missouri to not run when the system was overly stressed. And we know that there were projects in the 2024 ITP that you discussed, in the Branson area and in Southwest Missouri. But when you're looking at the load shed events in 2025, are there issues that are going to be looked at in the 2025 ITP that were not considered earlier? This, about the winter storm and the generators not running in Southwest Missouri?
Yes, it's an excellent question. So the 24 was more of a historical look at events and seeing where that trap generation, so to speak, is located. In 25, we'll be looking more forward looking and anticipating with all these system updates and the forecasted load, plus extreme conditions out in the future. So, say year 10 has an extreme winter case. Is there any additional trap generation out in year 10? And that will disclose additional areas for us to focus in on. I did see some maps yesterday that will be presented at the Transmission Planning Summit to illustrate where those locations may be for load shed and trap generation.
Thanks. I might ask more questions about that next week. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there
Thank you, Adam.
any other staff questions? Any questions from our other stakeholders that are present?
I have one. This is Rebecca Atkins from Missouri Public Utility Alliance. Sunny, on that last slide that you were showing with the large loads increasing in the ITP study driving, some new transmission needs there. I know that there's still some uncertainty in those load growth projections. Is there any way, if those loads don't materialize, that cost goes back to, whoever thought they were going to need it and didn't end up needing it? Or do those just become assets that are spread across the footprint?
Yeah, excellent question. Something I should have mentioned in my presentation is we are developing a two-tier approach to the 25 ITP portfolio, one that addresses extreme conditions, winter and summer, and meets the traditional ITP needs for economics, reliability, all those things on slide 3. In addition to that, we're going to have a second tier portfolio that looks at the large spot load driven NTCs on top of that traditional portfolio. And stakeholders will have the ability to weigh in on their confidence for submitting those spot loads, and if those are still trending to being material assets on the grid. That's one protection, is to do the portfolio that way. The other protection that we're developing a revision request for is to put more teeth into the notification to construct. So say we all agree that we must build this transmission for the spot load. We're going to put more teeth into the notification to construct that shows progress for that load to come online. And if it doesn't, that would trigger a NTC reevaluation at that time. So then we'd consider it in the future ITP if that project's still needed or not needed. That can help with some cost decisions.
Thank you.
Follow-up.
Certainly. One more question from staff.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Adam McKinney with the Missouri Commission again. Sonny, I wanted to ask about the stakeholder discussion about large load probability. We know there's 55 suggestions of, roughly 10 gigs of large load in the 2025 ITP. I saw that slide that you presented, or one of your staffers presented at the CPP meeting this week. What do you expect if a utility gets asked, do you expect them to disclose who they think it is, or what kind of information do you think a utility would say if, myself or some other rando asked, tell me about the large load that you think you're getting, and in next year. I just want to know how you think that sort of discussion would go.
Yeah, based on previous experience, some of those customers are held very confidentially with those utilities. So it's hard to extract that information given some of the non-disclosure agreements that the large load entity may impose on the utilities. What we have tailored this more to is, are these locations, regardless of if it's a Google or a Microsoft, are these the locations that you're aiming at for large load connection? So is it, customer A, B, or C that can connect here? Tell us the area that you're really targeting. So that's been our approach, and what we're debating is whether that notification to construct should require that utility has a interconnection customer under a service agreement within, say, 12 months of that transmission recommendation. So that's kind of the way that we've tried to tailor the protection for cost within our purview, knowing that we may not be successful in getting all the details for which customer, how likely those customers are to move forward.
I really appreciate that. I can definitely see SPP and the utility having a very good conversation about that. I just don't know how much of a backstop the stakeholder process would be without everybody having to NDA it up and having to pinky swear that they're not going to, rat somebody out or whatever. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you again to SPP, and I will ask for MISO to give their presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Mason Bleem. I'm the regional coordinator and director for state regulatory strategy across the MISO Central region. And just want to thank the opportunity to be here today to Chair Han, the commission, and staff. With me are two of our really important senior leaders on the MISO team. I've got Laura Rauch, our Executive Director of Transmission Planning, and also Jessica Lewis, our Executive Director of System Operations, with me today. With that, if we can turn to the next slide, I will turn it over to Laura to start out with our MISO transmission planning update, followed by our FERC Order 881 and GETS discussion, and then a little bit on our GridX involvement. I'll turn it over to Laura, and if we can turn to slide 3. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Mason. My name is Laura Rauch. I'm the Executive Director of Transmission Planning here. So starting at the beginning with MISO transmission planning, similar to SPP, the name of the game in transmission planning is making sure that we look at the system in a number of different ways. For MISO, that all culminates in what we call our MTEP, or MISO Transmission Expansion Plan, and it really includes everything, starting with local planning, generation interconnection, and also our long-range transmission planning. That local process is what you see on the slide here, and this is a 18-month process that occurs every year. So we actually are in the spot where we have started MTEP 26, which is the review of projects that could go to our board of directors in 2026 December timeframe, while we are wrapping up the work on the MTEP 25 projects. The majority of projects which go through this process are fairly local. These tend to serve needs that are 2, 5, 10 years out in the future, and really form the basis of our NERC reliability or TPL compliance requirements. For Missouri, as we look at the projects going through this year, there's about 25 going through, a little over $500 million of investment. Those include some generation interconnection projects and also some that are serving reliability. So of the projects, there are 19 that are serving reliability. Those are associated with either local reliability, load growth, and we also have a few aging conditions. But the predominant driver here, similar to SPP, continues to be serving the system reliably and ensuring that we have the transmission in place to support these new large load growths. On the next slide, the MTEP process really tailors in and fits within our long-range transmission planning process. And so long-range planning, or LRTP, is an opportunity for MISO to step back, work with our stakeholders to look at the system over a variety of conditions, and build a transmission portfolio that focuses out on needs up to 20 years in the future. We then coordinate this with MTEP to make sure that we're meeting the localized needs and the more near-term needs. So ultimately, the two pieces fit together into a cohesive whole. This started with our LRTP Tranche 1 portfolio, which was these 18 projects that you see here. And on the next slide, last December, we approved another portfolio, Tranche 2, which built on Tranche 1, built on the investment in MTEP to go and continue working on what transmission system we need to really enable the economic development, to meet reliability needs, transfer assessment. This will support system reliability and resilience. As we worked through this, we looked at both the economic benefits. We also looked at multiple scenarios, including scenarios where we ran more extreme weather conditions, trying to understand how these might be used and useful, those critical, sometimes we say 10% of hours, where the system's under stress. We wanted a portfolio that provides value under multiple conditions every day, and also really wanted to capture the value it provides in those extreme weather conditions. On the next slide, we are restarting that process to look at what the long-term system needs can be, with a focus on not only what is committed, but what might be prospective coming out in the future, including economic development, any policies, that reliability, resiliency, and support for extreme weather. This starts with our futures redesign process, and futures here are snapshots of what the system could look like in 20 years. So looking at potential load levels and looking at multiple load levels, looking at what generation may be built to serve those, especially focused on member goals and state goals there. We've tried to build a number of different models so that we can bookend the potential uncertainty. Knowing that we're talking 20 years out, we know we're not going to necessarily be 100% spot on what we predict. But if we predict load, a range of load, and we fall somewhere in the middle, then we know that the transmission tested against all of those load levels will have value. And the same is true of resource mix. So really, this feeds into our transmission plan, long-term transmission planning, trying to make sure we have a robust portfolio. And we'll also be enhancing this to focus on resource planning needs, to try to talk about the journey to that 20-year out destination and the potential paths that it could take, and not just that endpoint. One thing I will say is you see a schedule here which is focused on getting these futures updated towards the end of the year. With the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that does change fairly significantly some of the economics behind wind and solar development by removing production and investment tax credits. As a result, you will see this posted later today and coming out on Friday. We will be delaying the completion of the futures to rerun some analysis and make sure that they align with the laws on the books. So in particular, you'll see us, while we have some results to post today, we will be rerunning those without investment and production tax credits for wind, aligning with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And just to close out the transmission planning aspect of this on the next slide, we are also continuing to work through FERC Order 1920, which was an order from FERC that really focused on how do you do regional planning, how do you look at different scenarios, different weather patterns, and understand the risks that might be on the system and the benefits of transmission solution. We do believe that our processes are by and large very compliant with those. Looking at the scenario development that looks a lot like our futures, identification of needs and facilities we've done successfully through LRTP portfolios, and the benefit selection, the benefits we use very much align with the FERC requirements. There are a few areas where we are working with. In particular, I'll echo him on the thanks for the organization of MISO states and our state commissioners on leaning in on some of the questions on cost allocation that are in the order. We'll also be looking at other odds and ends, things like partial funding that the order asks us to look into, and increasing ties between transmission planning and generation interconnection. So with that, I will hand it over to Mason to talk a little bit more about Order 881 and GETS.
Thank you, Laura. If we could go to the next slide, please. And so I just wanted to cover that, here at MISO, we are advancing key initiatives that will positively impact reliability and system efficiency. And as a part of that, just undertaking an evaluation of our reliability metrics. We're also continuing our compliance and implementation of FERC Order 2222 with stakeholders. And in particularly, we're continuing our collaboration with transmission owners to implement FERC Order 881. And in particularly, I just wanted to give a little bit of background here, just to level set. So 881, as we know, was issued by FERC in December of 21, and that requires transmission providers like MISO and transmission owners to implement ambient adjusted ratings to account for natural cooling and heating effects of weather on the transmission facility ratings. And we were making progress on Order 881, however, increasing uncertainty on implementation guidelines, driven largely by vendor delays and follow-on effects made with complying that order. It just made it unrealistic, and therefore we did file with FERC in March of 25 a request for extension in order to fulfill our compliance, and allowing us a 3-year extension until 2028. We did receive a response from FERC on June 6th, which issued an order granting us our request for that extension to comply with the requirements of 881 until a yet to be determined date, no later than December 31st of 28. And so we are directed to make annual informational filings with FERC beginning June 6th, detailing our progress in that endeavor. And we are to notify FERC of an effective date for tariff revisions at least 14 days prior to that date. So we do remain committed to the 881 implementation process. Internally, MISO has established a cross-functional project teams and initiated a program to ensure organizational alignment. And within its footprint, we have partnered with transmission owners to help facilitate their compliance efforts through various initiatives, including hosting workshops to foster those discussions on solutions in progress, and established a value added type program, which is the Weather Information Interface Service that provides real-time and forecasted ambient conditions throughout the MISO footprint to our transmission owners so that they can use this information to calculate their facilities' AARs. Externally, MISO has partnered with vendors and the Linux Foundation to establish open and free available information to aid in common and interoperable exchange of rating data. And as solution developments progress, MISO will expand that stakeholder engagement activities to further conduct system testings and integration testing with transmission owners. And that's what I have to add on our FERC Order 881 compliance. And if we can move to the next slide here. Before I turn it over to Jessica, I did just want to level set that we do define resiliency of the grid. I know that was a question from staff posed to us. We do define it as the ability of the electric grid to withstand and recover from disruptive events, including the capability to anticipate, absorb, adapt to, and recover from such events. And that encompasses a range of strategy and actions, such as hardening, redundancy, diversification of resources amongst the generation fleet, and operational protocols, which all aim to address various risks and ensure the system's ability to maintain a reliable electric service. And so we have been and continue to be proactive with our markets to help alleviate resiliency threats. Examples of that include our ramping products, emergency pricing modifications, the use of dispatchable intermittent resources, and we also have plans to help mitigate resilience through improvements to our automated general control systems and resource availability needs, also known as RAN assessment. In addition to our market mechanisms, our transmission plan system, as Laura just covered, is extraordinarily robust. We are developing a 765 backbone as a part of our LRTP tranche 2.1, and also moving forward as well as we build out that system. Consists of over 3,631 miles of transmission lines across the Midwest, and our aim there is to enhance grid reliability and efficiency by facilitating those large power transfers needed to support the region's evolving energy landscape. I did just want to highlight real quick here that we regularly participate in regional and state emergency management drills and risk assessments that also help to mitigate those resilience threats. And state and local regulators are critical in those spring and fall drills performed by MISO in identifying those critical assets and key resources, assessing the threats and vulnerability, and evaluating the consequences of losing those assets. And so we just wanted to highlight our coordinated drills with our operations and member operation teams. And those drills usually do include our neighboring RTOs. And so I did just want to highlight those two items as how we do assess and identify threats for the RTO and in order to determine our resiliency efforts across MISO. With that, I'll turn it over to Jessica.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Lucas. I'm the Executive Director of System Operations here at MISO. As Mason said, in recent years, we've been really focused on finding ways to be more proactive and forward-looking, particularly in our operations. Is really important for us to ensure that we're well prepared and more resilient for all those risks that are out there. So on this slide, we've highlighted a few of the initiatives that we believe are really helping us do those things. So first, we've been focused on improvements to our outage planning and coordination processes. This work is becoming, as you all are aware, more complicated and more critical, particularly as the fleet continues to evolve and we experience reserve margins that are continuing to shrink. The big takeaway from what we're doing here is really automating a lot of the necessary study work that goes into processing the outages. This is important because it will allow our engineers to spend a lot less time executing the actual studies themselves and more time evaluating the results and performing a more robust analysis for kind of those what if scenarios that can become really critical in the operating horizon. So in that middle column there, from a control room perspective, we are always needing to be prepared for anything that can get thrown at us. And we've been really focused on looking at our critical tool set and implementing some solutions that ensure we have meaningful backups so that we can continue to provide those critical reliability services. So the enhancements that we mentioned here are for the tool set used as our role as the balancing authority. These enhancements will allow us to maintain load and generation balance and dispatch generation even if our primary tools fail, which does happen from time to time. And finally, in that last column, probably here across the industry and especially at MISO, a lot of discussion about the variability and risk that continues to grow on the system. And so we're really focusing attention and efforts on finding ways to assess and plan for that expected variability and the associated risk so that we can be prepared the best way that is possible. So Mason, I think it goes back to you for our last slide.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. So I did just want to highlight that we are participating in GridX, and planning is underway at MISO. That'll take place November 18th and 19th, this coming November. And GridX is hosted on odd number years by NERC's EISAC, and that is the Electric Information Sharing and Analysis Center. It's a North America's largest grid security exercise and provides the ISAC members and partner organizations the opportunity to practice how they would respond to and recover from really a scenario that they can develop on their own, or you can play along under a coordinated cyber and physical security threat. Again, the date is November 18th and 19th with 8 hours of play each day for the national scenario. MISO staff from across our organization will be playing, and our planning team is currently planning to participate 8 hours of play at some point during the 2 days. So we're excited to discuss collaboration with interested members. If you're interested in collaborating or you are participating as a commission or commission staff with your utilities and would like to better understand our planning efforts underway, please feel free to reach out to start that conversation with us. And so, next slide, just want to thank the commission staff for your engagement with MISO, and we appreciate that as always, and also from the commissioners yourself. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask Jessica, Laura, or myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any commission questions at this time?
I do have a question, Judge DePel.
Go ahead, Chair Hahn.
I think this is for Laura. Laura mentioned the 1920 for Gorder 1920, and I'm just curious if MISO through OMS is going to be looking at any part of the state agreement process as part of a cost allocation discussion. If you could offer any remarks, that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hahn. So the provisions in 1920 really do ask for two things on cost allocation. They ask for us to talk about what are backstop cost allocations, so what would we use for these regional projects, but they also require us to really set up a state agreement approach. This doesn't require that we have the state agreement nailed down by the end of the day, by the time we file, I should say, but it does require us to have an avenue for states to use. That is progressing. It's going on through what we call our CAPCOM process. So it's absolutely leaning in, and we'll be happy to support what comes out. Really what we want to do there is make sure that what we file is useful for the states. And Order 1920 really does give a lot of deference to the states in those processes too. So we are absolutely supporting it. We do see the states are a little bit on lead on how they might like to have that go forward, but we are available and participate on a regular basis.
Thanks.
Are there any other commissioner questions? Not hearing any. Are there staff questions?
Yes. Hey, Laura. Rich Germinder with the Missouri Public Service Commission staff. You mentioned Tranche 1 in 2022 and most recently 2.1 in 2024. What's your timeline for future tranches?
Thanks, Rich. That's a great question. I do not have a great answer for you yet. The first stage is absolutely completing those future scenarios. Once we get done with those, and we are still targeting to complete the future scenarios this year, we'll start having some better discussions on what scope might be for that, how many of the scenarios we need to study, what extreme weather conditions might have. Those are some pretty foundational questions, especially on how many scenarios and futures we might want to evaluate. So I think the timeline will really come out of that and depend on if we need to study 3 scenarios versus 2. For perspective, when we studied Tranche 1, we used 1 future scenario for our analysis. That was our lowest scenario. In Tranche 2.1, we did a mid-range scenario and tested it against a low end. We haven't finalized our futures. We haven't finalized one other commitment, which is to do scenarios and sensitivities to figure out if we've set those bookends right. But if we think there are 3 viable bookends, we may end up wanting to do 3 scenarios, and that will just take more time. So I don't have a timeline for you. I will commit to certainly giving y'all advance notice and asking you how you would like the study scope to go to frame that timeline.
Yeah, appreciate that. And then kind of with that, to what extent would you wait on future tranches before tranche 1 and 2.1, that those projects are constructed, implemented, and you're seeing those impacts on the grid?
Yeah, our goals are always to approve transmission in a just-in-time basis. So we would, as we build the transmission system, we do assume that projects that are approved go into service. And so we would have those as part of our base model, and we would build the need on when we need to approve other projects, considering those projects already in service. So certainly any future tranches we would see going into service after tranche 2.1, they would build on tranche 2.1 and only be recommended if they are still needed after considering that tranche's impact on the grid.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other staff questions? Mr. McKinney?
Thanks. Adam McKinney with the Missouri Commission. Laura, we had a discussion with SPP about, large loads in the planning process, including, how much was expected in 2025 and 2026. Can you talk about the assumptions that MISO has for, MTEP 25 and MTEP 26 involving large load additions?
And I'll break it down into a couple different lenses. Given we just talked about LRTP, I'll start there and just say, when we look at large load additions in our long range forecast, so these are talking about 20 years out, we do have a range of variety of potential that we see there. I will tell you there's no scenario where the potential equals all the large load additions that we have heard of. We do a significant haircut on that, knowing that they're not going to be there. And we also will be shaping our process to make sure that we're not building any transmission in our long range planning that is dependent on a prospective load. Similar to what we do with generation, we want to make sure those costs go through the process. That leads us to our MTEP process, which is where we have these large load additions come in and through. So we have seen an expansion and a lot more large load additions coming into that process. They both come in through our regular cycle, where we take the 18-month process to study them. We've also seen a large increase in large load additions going through what we call our expedited project review, or EPR process. Looking at the MTEP 25, we do have several projects that are going through that are really related to load growth, new substations, and we can certainly provide you that information. We also have seen significant load growth, so I just pulled up the dashboard of load that we're seeing projected, and this inspected and service dates are 2026 and 2027. In Missouri, it's about 1.8 gigawatts of load, largely between Columbia and St. Louis, that we have studied and recommended transmission to support it as needed.
And thank you. And to follow up on that about the 1.8 gig in Missouri, is that based on information that's been provided by utilities, or is that based on some sort of other reference?
This is based on information that's provided by utilities. When we talk about building projects for specific load, and that's what this 1.8 gigawatts is, we really rely on the utilities to let us know that it's firm, the location, the characteristics. So it's fairly far down the process and discussions with those utilities. The utilities and the load always lead the discussions. MISO supports them once they've gotten certain enough to actually commit funds.
And just to make sure I understand, is that something that came through the regular cycle or the expedited process about the stuff that's not due to be done this year? I just want to understand kind of how that comes through the process and goes through the sub-regional planning meetings and the other planning processes?
It depends. And so we can certainly get back to you with the specific projects and where they're going through the process. Ideally, we try to have as many projects go through the full process as possible. That gives the largest timeline, creates less fire drills, and gives just more space for the conversations to happen.
Okay.
If they come in more quickly, we have to do exactly the same thing, just in a more condensed time frame. So we recently revised our expedited project review process to give us space to do the studies we need up to and including all our reliability analysis, stability, and still provide stakeholders with the opportunity to opine on the results.
Okay, and last question, like the 1.8 gig in Missouri, do you have the entire MISO footprint roughly equivalent number?
Let me put on a different filter. It's about 11 gigs total.
And is that both MISO Classic and MISO South?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other staff questions? Are there any other stakeholder questions? Don't see any. And any further commissioner questions?
Actually, yeah, Judge Chappelle. I just want to second Adam's request to understand what those projects are in Missouri. We can watch the public presentations that have happened and understand some of the economic development projects, but I think it might be more helpful to understand the specific, more specific the better. So whatever information you can provide, really interested in seeing it. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll send over what we have, and if you'd like a follow-up meeting, Chair Hahn, we're happy to oblige.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Mitchell, did you have a question?
I did, and this is just having recently come onto OMS and just trying to get a broader understanding of a few things. Could you, and maybe a question for Laura, if you could walk through just at a high level MISO's philosophy on cost allocation for grid impacts that are driven primarily or maybe solely by large load customers?
Absolutely. So in general, our philosophy on cost allocation is beneficiary pays. We have to make sure the costs and benefits are aligned there. When we talk about large load additions, I know there's a whole host of things on the retail rate side that we do not touch. What we tend to see these come across our footprint as local reliability projects, and that means that the costs associated with those stay local with that utility that they're connecting with. When we go into larger potential for large load additions, we try to stay at that high level, building a highway system, and make sure we're not touching on the costs that would be attributed to a particular load interconnection. That's a complicated topic, so I certainly respect if you would like some follow-ups there or a deeper dive. But in general, we do try to spend a lot of time making sure that the benefits and costs are very well aligned. For large loads, that means keeping most of them local and assuming the utilities will have the right agreements for the load itself.
So fair to say that cost is allocated to the local utility, and then the local utility manages how that is passed on to the large load entity?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Not seeing any. Well, I appreciate again MISO and SPP making your presentations and everyone's participation. If there's nothing further, then I believe that will conclude our meeting and we can be adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.